In just 43 seconds, what began as a carefully orchestrated appearance on Loose Women would spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in British television history. 43 seconds was all it took for Prince Harry to go from composed royal to red-faced fury, hurling accusations at host Denise Welch that would send shockwaves through the studio and leave viewers watching in stunned silence as decades of buried resentment erupted on live television. The atmosphere in the Loose Women studio was already electric before Prince Harry even took his seat. Behind the scenes, whispers had been circulating about potential friction between the Duke of Sussex and the notoriously outspoken panelist Denise Welch. Sources close to production revealed that Harry's team had specifically requested certain topics be off-limits, including his ongoing legal battles with the British press and his strained relationship with the royal family. But Denise Welch had never been one to follow scripts or honor gentlemen's agreements. As the cameras rolled and the familiar Loose Women theme music faded, Denise sat poised with her trademark knowing smile, her eyes already gleaming with the anticipation of what was to come. Harry, dressed impeccably in a navy suit, managed a polite smile as he settled into the guest chair, his media-trained composure intact despite the visible tension in his shoulders. "Your Royal Highness," Denise began, her voice dripping with barely concealed sarcasm as she emphasized his title, or should I say, just Harry now. It's so hard to keep track of your preferred titles these days. The first crack appeared in Harry's diplomatic facade. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "Harry is fine, Denise. Though I notice you seem to have strong opinions about what I should or shouldn't be called." "Oh, I have strong opinions about many things," Denise shot back, leaning forward slightly like a predator sensing weakness, "particularly about people who make millions selling family secrets while claiming to want privacy. But we'll get to that." The other panelists shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the warm, welcoming tone typically reserved for royal guests. Harry's media handler, positioned just off camera, looked increasingly concerned as Denise continued to circle her prey with surgical precision. "Let's start with something simple," Denise continued, consulting her notes with theatrical deliberation. "Your new documentary series. Another deep dive into your childhood trauma, I'm told. Don't you think the British public might be getting a bit tired of hearing about how difficult your privileged life has been?" Harry's composure began to fracture. "I think there's a difference between sharing experiences that might help others and wallowing in privilege, Denise. But I understand nuance isn't always valued in tabloid culture." The barb hit its mark. Denise's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked ready to tear flesh. "Tabloid culture? How fascinating that you'd use that term, considering your wife's former profession involved quite a bit of tabloid attention. Didn't it? Or have we conveniently forgotten about those glamour shots?" The studio fell dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Harry's face flushed red, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. This was the moment his media training collided with his very human instinct to defend his family. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" Harry's voice dropped to a dangerously low register, each word carefully enunciated. "Are you seriously sitting there, on national television, making comments about my wife's past?" Denise didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed energized by his reaction. "I'm simply pointing out the irony, Harry. You've spent years complaining about media intrusion and tabloid culture, yet you married someone who actively courted that very same attention for years. Some might call that hypocritical." The other panelists looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. This had gone far beyond the usual Loose Women controversies. Harry was visibly struggling to maintain control, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "You don't know what you're talking about," Harry said through gritted teeth. "You have no idea what my wife went through, what we both went through at the hands of your precious British media machine." "Your precious British media machine?" Denise's voice rose mockingly. "This is rich. Coming from someone who's done more media appearances in the past 3 years than most A-list celebrities. You can't seem to stay out of the spotlight, can you? Netflix deals, book deals, podcast deals. For someone who wanted privacy, you certainly found a lucrative way to get it." Harry shot to his feet so abruptly that his chair rolled backward. The sudden movement sent a ripple of alarm through the studio crew. You want to know about lucrative, Denise? Let's talk about how much money British tabloids made destroying my mother's life. Let's talk about how they hounded her to death, and then turned their attention to my wife. Oh, here we go, Denise said, rolling her eyes dramatically. The Diana card. Do you ever get tired of using your mother's death as a shield for your own choices? The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Harry's face went from red to white in an instant. Several crew members moved closer, sensing the situation was about to explode completely. His bodyguard, positioned near the exit, tensed visibly. What did you just say about my mother? Harry's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than if he had shouted. Did you just trivialize her death? Denise realized she might have pushed too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. I'm saying that constantly invoking tragedy doesn't excuse present-day behavior. Your mother was a remarkable woman who genuinely helped people. You're a man-child having a very public tantrum because people dare to criticize your choices. The insult landed like a physical blow. Harry's entire body seemed to coil with tension, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually lunge across the table. The atmosphere in the studio had become so charged that even the usually unflappable production team was scrambling to figure out how to handle what was rapidly becoming a complete disaster. But this was only the beginning. What happened next would make those opening salvos look like polite small talk. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Harry slowly lowered himself back into his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled in a way that suggested he was using every ounce of his military training to maintain composure. When he spoke again, his voice carried the cold authority of someone who had commanded soldiers in combat. You want to talk about choices, Denise? Let's talk about your choice to sit there and insult a dead woman who can't defend herself. Let's talk about your choice to attack my wife, who isn't here to respond to your pathetic attempts at relevance. Denise's confidence wavered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, doubling down with the reckless abandon of someone who had already crossed too many lines to turn back now. Pathetic attempts at relevance? That's rich coming from someone whose entire career is built on being born into the right family. At least, I earned my place at this table. Earned your place? Harry's laugh was bitter and sharp. By what metric? Making a living out of tearing down people better than yourself? By building a career on controversy and manufactured outrage? The other panelists remained frozen, clearly wanting to intervene but paralyzed by the sheer intensity of the exchange. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial or let the carnage continue for the sake of ratings. Denise's face flushed with anger. People better than myself? You mean people who've never had to work a real day in their lives? People who think the world owes them something because of their bloodline? At least when I fuck up, I don't have taxpayers footing the bill for my mistakes. The profanity seemed to unleash something primal in Harry. His carefully maintained royal composure finally cracked completely. You want to talk about taxpayers? You absolute hypocrite? Where do you think your BBC salary comes from? You've been feeding off public money just as long as I have, except you produce nothing but poison while doing it. At least I'm honest about what I am, Denise fired back, her voice rising to match his intensity. I don't prance around the world preaching about mental health and compassion while simultaneously destroying my own family for profit. You've turned betrayal into a goddamn business model. Harry slammed his fist on the table so hard that water glasses jumped and several panelists actually flinched backward. Destroying my family? Are you completely delusional? They destroyed themselves long before I ever opened my mouth. I'm just the first one with the balls to tell the truth about it. The truth? Denise scoffed. Your truth changes depending on who's writing the biggest check. First it was Oprah, then Netflix, then your little book deal. What's next, Harry? A reality show? Maybe you can get the kids involved. I'm sure there's good money in exploiting the next generation too. The mention of his children crossed a line that Harry hadn't even known existed. He shot to his feet again, this time moving around the table toward Denise with such purpose that his bodyguard immediately stepped forward, hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. Don't you dare bring my children into this, you vindictive bitch, Harry snarled, his finger pointing directly at Denise's face. Don't you fucking dare. For the first time since the confrontation began, genuine fear flickered across Denise's features. She had expected anger, even outrage, but the cold fury radiating from Harry was something entirely different. This wasn't just wounded pride. This was a father's protective instinct triggered to its most dangerous level. But even faced with a visibly furious prince advancing on her, Denise's stubborn pride refused to let her back down. "Oh, so now we're bringing out the real Harry, are we? The one who threatens women on live television? Very royal of you. I'm sure your grandmother would be so proud." The mention of Queen Elizabeth was the final straw. Harry stopped dead in his tracks, his face cycling through emotions so quickly, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Grief, rage, guilt, and something much darker all flashed across his features before settling into an expression of pure, concentrated hatred. "You poisonous, talentless slag," Harry said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than if he had screamed. "You sit there throwing around my grandmother's name like you have any right to speak it. You wouldn't have been fit to clean her shoes." Denise rose from her own chair now, meeting his challenge with reckless bravado. "At least I never caused her a moment's worry. At least I never made her final years a living hell by airing the family's dirty laundry for the entertainment of Americans." The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow. His face crumpled for just an instant before hardening into something unrecognizable. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of years of suppressed pain and fury. "You think she didn't understand why I left? You think she didn't see what they were doing to Meghan? My grandmother was the strongest woman who ever lived, and she died knowing her own institution had failed to protect her family. That's on them, not on me." "Keep telling yourself that," Denise shot back mercilessly. "Keep pretending you're the victim while you cash those checks. But we all know the truth. You abandoned your duty, your country, and your family the moment it became convenient. You're nothing but a spoiled brat who never learned the word no." Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Security personnel throughout the studio tensed, recognizing the signs of someone on the verge of complete loss of control. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every nuance of what was rapidly becoming the most explosive television moment in decades. But just as it seemed like the confrontation might turn physical, something even more devastating was about to unfold. Harry stepped back from Denise, his breathing heavy and labored. For a moment, the studio held its collective breath, thinking perhaps cooler heads might prevail. But then Harry's expression shifted into something far more dangerous than physical anger. Cold, calculated fury, mixed with the kind of insider knowledge that could destroy careers. "You want to talk about truth, Denise?" Harry's voice was eerily calm now, which somehow made it more menacing than his earlier outbursts. "Let's talk about some real truth, like how you've been struggling with your own demons while sitting here judging everyone else's choices." Denise's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," Harry continued, his smile predatory. "You think royal security doesn't do background checks? You think we don't know about your little episodes? The times you've had to take extended breaks from filming because you couldn't handle your own shit?" The color drained completely from Denise's face. Several panelists looked confused, but the producers behind the cameras suddenly looked very concerned. Harry was clearly referencing information that wasn't public knowledge. "You have no right," Denise began, but Harry cut her off ruthlessly. "I have no right? You've spent the last 20 minutes dragging my dead mother through the mud, attacking my wife, and threatening my children, but I have no right to point out your hypocrisy? You want to talk about mental health and getting help? Maybe start by looking in the fucking mirror." Denise was visibly shaking now. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Stop. Just stop." But Harry was beyond stopping. Years of suppressed rage at the British media, at the system that had destroyed his mother and tried to destroy his wife, came pouring out in a torrent of devastating precision. "You know what the real tragedy is, Denise? You could have been something meaningful. Instead, you chose to become exactly what's wrong with this country's media. A bitter, talentless harpy who builds herself up by tearing others down. And the saddest part? You're not even good at it." "That's enough," Denise finally exploded, her voice cracking with emotion. "You entitled piece of shit. You think because you were born into privilege, you can say whatever you want about people? You think your title gives you the right to destroy me on live television?" "My title?" Harry laughed, the sound harsh and mirthless. "I gave up my title, remember? That's what this whole thing has been about. But here's what I didn't give up. My ability to recognize a bully when I see one. And you, Denise Welch, are nothing but a sad, pathetic bully who never learned when to shut her mouth." The insult landed like a knockout punch. Denise stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, before her face contorted with pure rage. "Get out!" she hissed. "Get the fuck out of my studio!" "Your studio?" Harry's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "I wasn't aware you owned ITV now. But you know what? I'll gladly leave. Unlike you, I have better things to do than sit in this toxic cesspit pretending to care about women's issues while systematically destroying every woman who disagrees with you." Harry turned to address the cameras directly, his media training finally kicking in as he delivered what would become one of the most quoted television moments of the year. To anyone watching at home who might be struggling with their mental health, who might be dealing with family trauma, or who might be trying to break free from toxic situations, don't let people like this convince you that seeking help makes you weak. Don't let bullies shame you into silence. And don't ever let anyone tell you that your pain doesn't matter because of where you come from or what you've achieved. He turned back to Denise, who was still standing frozen in shock. "As for you, Denise, I genuinely hope you get the help you clearly need. But until you do, maybe consider that your platform comes with responsibility. Maybe think about whether your words help or harm. And maybe, just maybe, try to remember that the people you attack on television are human beings with families who love them." The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of cameras still rolling. Harry straightened his jacket, his royal composure returning like armor sliding back into place. "Ladies," he nodded politely to the other panelists, who looked like they'd witnessed a natural disaster. "Thank you for having me. Well, most of you." He walked toward the exit with measured steps, his security detail falling into formation around him. But just as he reached the edge of the set, Denise found her voice one last time. "You'll regret this, Harry," she called after him, her voice shrill and desperate. "This will follow you forever." Harry paused at the studio door and turned back one final time. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced far worse enemies than a talk show host having a meltdown. "The only thing I regret, Denise, is that it took me this long to realize that some people aren't worth the energy it takes to be polite to them. Enjoy explaining this to your producers." With that, Prince Harry walked out of the Loose Women's studio, leaving behind a scene of complete chaos. Denise remained standing at the desk, visibly trembling, while the other panelists sat in stunned silence. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. The confrontation had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it would be talked about for years to come. Harry had entered the studio as a guest, trying to promote his latest project. He left as a man who had finally said everything he'd been holding back about the British media machine that had tormented his family for decades. As the studio doors closed behind him, one thing was perfectly clear. This was a battle that nobody had won. But Prince Harry had made damn sure that Denise Welch would never forget the day she decided to pick a fight with the wrong member of the royal family.